Go ahead, Francis.
Hello, friends. Welcome to this 41st webinar on the Secret Doctrine. This webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheadings Moria Federation webinars, then webinar series in progress, as shown here. All episodes of this and the Secret Teaching series are also now available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald, Secret Doctrine, or Secret Teachings. Okay, I want to add one technical note here, which is that you have an attendee controlled video box that shows as many or as few participants as you would like. I recommend, in order to not cover the screen, that that you use the minimized function, which is the little line on the far left up on that video box. I don't show my video, and I don't view anybody else's, so I recommend that. That way we get a full view of the content. Okay, this as is our habit, we'll start by checking in on HPB and Colonel Olcott's travels as described in Old Diary Leads, this 6-volume set shown here. During our last session, we found Olcott in Darjeeling. Upon returning to the intense Indian summer heat of Dhaka, the good colonel discovered that his fame as a mesmeric healer had grown exponentially. He was known nationwide at this point. So during the next many months, Olcott traveled throughout India, healing the sick and infirm by day, and lecturing on theosophy to huge crowds almost every evening. And all this in temperatures averaging over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The Theosophist, started by HPB and Olcott in 1879, records Olcott's visit to Dhaka. To get a sense of Olcott's impact, let's read a passage from a Dhaka newspaper called The Indian Mirror, here reproduced in the Theosophist of May 1883. Could we get a reader, please?
Okay, Greg, can you read that for us, please?
Just a copy on the right, please.
So just read, because you have usually highlight the stuff you want to read, or just read the whole thing.
Starting up here, Colonel Olcott.
Oh, okay.
And do the
Okay.
whole.
Okay, Colonel Olcott at Dhaka. Colonel Olcott delivered his second lecture on Sunday, the 17th at 3 p.m. in the Northbrook Hall of Dhaka. As a matter of course, the hall was filled to suffocation. A large number of the incurable invalids of our time assembled in Babu Parbudi Chernroy's bungalow, waiting most anxiously to be relieved of their long-standing maladies by the influence of the mesmeric art. But the colonel, not having had sufficient time at his disposal to be able to devote his attention to curing their diseases, they were dismissed. In course of his first lecture on Friday night, the learned colonel said that mesmerism had the power of giving sight to the blind, hearing to the deaf, and speech to the dumb. People were therefore on the tiptoe of expectation to see some diseases cured, which had baffled the persistent efforts of the surgeon and the physician to effect a recovery. It would have been worthwhile for our worthy colonel to have continued for some time in the metropolis of Eastern Bengal and practically demonstrated the efficacy of the healing art of mesmerism. A hysteric patient and one affected with colic pain for years have been cured. A girl of 4 years affected with hard paralysis had been partially relieved.
Thank you, Greg. Okay. Could we get a reader for this? Oops. This next slide, please.
I'll read that. I frankly confess my belief that I could not have gone through such a great and sustained outpouring of my vitality unless I had been helped by our teachers, although I was never so told by them. What I am forced to realize is that I have not had so phenomenal a healing power since I got my order to stop the work, i.e., towards the close of 1883. And I am convinced that, though I should try ever so hard, I should fail to cure those desperate cases, which I would then dispose of with the greatest ease within a half hour or less. I had a hearty welcome home from HPB and the rest, and a series of phenomena were done, chiefly for my benefit, among which I shall only mention the one noted in my entry for the 6th of June. I say that, not being able to decide whether to accept the invitation to Colombo, Ceylon, I placed ACB's letter in the shrine, locked the door, instantly reopened it, and got the written order of through a second adept in French. It was done while I stood there, and not a half minute had elapsed. So far as it goes, that effectually disposes of the pretense that these communications were fabricated in advance and passed through a sliding panel at the back of the shrine. A whole month of homely desk work at Adar was a delightful episode, varied with healings of patients, receptions of visitors, and metaphysical discussions with HPB.
Okay, so a couple of things. Homely was not, didn't mean ugly in the 19th century. It meant, home-based, right? So his homely tasks were not, ugly tasks, homely desk work. And then a couple other things. If you have been with this series from the beginning, you'll remember that there were a number of these old diary entrances where there was phenomena performed by HPB. If you've just joined, that's one of the qualities of HPB, is she was able to create what he calls phenomena. And this is just an example. Put a letter in, locked the door instantly, and discovered a written order from one of the students, or one of the adepts through another adept, that indicated whether or not he should go back to Colombo, which he's been to many times, and that's one of the places that he's done his healing work. But probably the most important part of this is that he discovered when he was out there for like 7,000 miles, going all through India. When he got home, he discovered that all this extraordinary work that he was able to do, this literally miraculous healing, was coming through his teachers, right? They were using him as a vehicle to express their abilities, right? He was a strong enough empath for them, through the science of impression, that he was actually able to heal. And then he says that he discovered really that no matter how hard he tried, without that impression, he would not be able to heal. I think he was still able to do minor cases, but these major healings fell away after he was told that he was to move on from this healing work. I found that very interesting. Okay. So we finished our last session while in the middle of HPB's extended commentary on verse 2. We've been with this like for 3 webinars. Verse 2 of stanza 5, which reads They make of him the messenger of their will. The Zayu becomes Fohat, the swift son of the divine sons, whose sons are the Lapika, runs circular errands. Fohat is the steed, and the thought is the rider. He passes like lightning through the fiery clouds, takes 3 and 5 and 7 strides through the 7 regions above and the 7 below. He lifts his voice and calls the innumerable sparks and joins them. So let's begin this session by rereading the segment we ended on last time, this second half of this paragraph, beginning with Zero Ana, right in the middle of the page. Could we get a reader, please?
Yvonne, can you read that for us, please?
Yes, I'm not getting let me see if I can get more of it. There it is. Okay. Zero Ana is the chakra or circle of Vishnu, the mysterious emblem, which is, according to the definition of a mystic, a curve of such a nature that as to any, the least possible part thereof, if the curve be protracted either way, it will proceed and finally re-enter upon itself and form one and the same curve, or that which we call the circle. No better definition could thus be given of the natural symbol and the evident nature of deity, which have its circumference everywhere, the boundless has. Therefore, its central point also everywhere. In other words, is in every point of the universe. The invisible deity is thus also the Dhyan Chohans, or the Rishis, the primitive 7 and the 9, without, and 10, including their synthetical unit, from which it steps into man. Returning to the commentary of stanza 4, the reader will understand why, while the Trans-Himalayan chakra was inscribed within it,
Go ahead to the text.
triangle, first line, cube, second line, and a pentacle with a dot in the center, thus a star, and then some other variations. The Kabbalistic circle of the Elohim reveals when the letters of the word
Alhim or Elohim.
Alhim or Elohim are numerically read, the famous numerals 13514, or by anagram 31415, the astronomical pi number, or the hidden meaning of the Dhyana Buddhas of the Gebers, the Gaborim, the Kaberi, and the Elohim, all signifying great men, titans, heavenly men, and on earth, the giants.
Thank you. So any thoughts or questions about this segment? In his first series of letters to students, which he called simply a monthly newsletter, Manly P. Hall elaborates on the nature of the Zero Ana Akern, which is the beginning of this segment. Could we get a couple of readers for this page, maybe a paragraph each?
Okay, Lynn, will you start? And then Scott, will you take over?
Like the Chaldeans and Egyptians, the Zoroastrians define first cause as an infinite extension and absolute diffusion of life. Activity they symbolize by a line extending infinitely in union with itself, a circle. The Persians regard the circle in the same way that the Greeks and Egyptians do, the absolute pattern of divine activity. Behind all the Persian philosophy, there is an absolute extension of being, the space god, the boundless circle of unknown time. This unknown, unaging, and unpassing principle they term Zero Ana Akern. Out of the Zero Ana Akern emerges the radiant, glorious, manifested creator of Ahura Mazda, space objectified as a gigantic entity. Zero Ana Akern, out of The thrice deep darkness contains ever within itself the power of objectification. Periodically, Ahura Mazda, the Logos, comes forth, manifests for a certain time, then retires again into the eternal darkness. Space, Zero Ana Akurn, has two aspects, unmanifesting and manifesting. When space manifests, it is Ahura Mazda. When it is unmanifested, it is Zero Ana Akurn. Ahura Mazda is a triad, a blazing triangle established in the darkness of eternal life. Ahura is the eternal wisdom. Mazda is the vehicle of that wisdom. And Ahura Mazda together is the light of knowledge manifesting before the created world.
Wow.
Scott?
Yeah. The old Persians were astrophilosophers. They used astrology as a symbolical science to represent the mystery of creation, using the zodiac as a key. They said that during the first three signs, the gods were creating. Aries was Zero Ana Akurna. Taurus was Ahura Mazda. And Gemini, the twins, was the third logos, the duality, Ormuz, Arium.
Ariman.
Ariman, okay.
Yeah, Ariman.
Ahura Mazda then caused to issue out of his own nature 6 secondary divinities, which with himself constitute the septenary. These are called the Amesha Septas.
Spentas.
Spentas, yeah.
It's often seen as one word, Amesha Spenta. Yeah.
Oh, okay, Amesha Spenta, okay. The 7 gods of the dawn, the Cosmocratores, the world builders, the Elohim, or the Dhyana Buddhis. The 7 gods created the 7 worlds. They are the spectrum, the 7 tones, and finally descending through different states of consciousness, become the 7 planets of the ancient solar system. They build the 7 heavens and the 7 earths. Ahura Mazda incarnates himself in the first heaven, the sphere of Saturn, and sends forth his 6 regions. He then incarnates again in the lowest world, and sending out his 6 manifestations, creates continents. Thus the 7 are the divine keepers of the earth, the lords of the divisions of time and place. They are the 7 patriarchs, and the 7 stars of the little bear, the mysterious constellation within which moves the mysterious axis of the pole.
Thanks, Scott. That was an appropriate reading for you.
Quite amazing.
Yeah.
Material.
Yeah, I'm hoping that this has been an extraordinary new treasure trove for me, these MPH newsletters, magazines. It's unbelievable how much he wrote. And it's, when it's accessible through the search function, it's really incredible. So I'm hoping, everyone, that you're starting to see a pattern evolve here, independent of the particular culture or a spiritual discipline that it comes through, which is that you have the no number, which in this case is a Zero Ana Akurn. It's darkness, it's completely without attributes. And then from it, you have the glorious one, the Oya Ohu, the younger, the refulgent glory, right? In this case, Ahura Mazda, the first singularity, right? And then you have from that the 6, which with the synthetic element becomes the 7, right? It's in theosophy. It's in every one of the ancient cultures had a form of this method or understanding of manifestation. So, and eventually, to me, it's always thrilling. Of course, you have to be a kind of an esoteric nerd to be thrilled by this. I have to admit, but it's always thrilling when yet another culture, exemplifies these ancient wisdom teachings. And it also just adds to the understanding with this slightly different slant on the, and for instance, different iconography like this, what you see here, the symbol of Ahura Mazda coming out of the circle there, you see in the center of his little figure, which is in fact, the zero ana Akern. So it's, I'm hoping that you are beginning to see the thread that ties these ancient cultures together. So next, any thoughts or questions about this
Yes.
before we move on? Yeah.
And Veronica says, Cosmocrator equals the one who holds the cosmos in his hands.
Oh, he's got the whole world in his hands, huh? Yeah, how about that? Well, the use of the word in theosophy is cosmocrates are world builders, those who are capable of building worlds. And of course, they would be, another definition would be being able to hold a world in your hands and thereby create. I mean, look right there. He's got this little circle. So it's the lesser circle of the outer manifested realm, that is, and he's the agent of transference from this circle, which is this circle. Hey, it's so fun to have a cursor. Didn't have that in GoToMeeting. Any other questions?
Yes, Thomas says Gemini is the united duality. Since it is the third logos, yes, and those forces manifest separately in nature. Actually, that's a question.
Yeah, well, you have this, he says here, the duality of Ormuzd Ahriman, which is the fundamental duality of spirit and matter. Ahriman is usually cast as an evil brother. This you'll also find from culture to culture. You have this form, of the evil counterpart to the god of light, right? And that's, of course, naturally Geminian in that you have the Castor Pollux duality, but the evil aspect of it is really exoteric because it's really more spirit form orientation. And of course, it's necessary to have that on the etheric, which the Gemini is also known for, before you have the final manifestation in Cancer, the gate into humanity or into material manifestation.
He also adds, could they also be seen as Thor and Loki?
As for in Loki, is that what you said?
Thor, think
Oh,
Norse.
Thor in Loki. Yeah, or Uden and Loki. Let me think about that a minute. Thor would be the Fohatic aspect, that being which is the electrical phenomena of Fohat. And the pure spirit aspect would be Uden. So it would be Uden and Loki. And they were both of the same, they were a spiritual brotherhood.
Okay, and then Greg had his hand raised and he put it down, and because he wrote, he says, Greg, unmute yourself and you say this. I'm never going to be able to say that word.
Well, I was Mom and I went to the Mayan in the Mayan area in Yucatan, and one of the gods and goddesses there was Quetzalcoatl. And Quetzalcoatl is clearly, I think, very similar in the same nature. I think because there's a good side of Quetzalcoatl, and then there's his evil brother or something, and that he's going to come back and show us the light, I guess. But it's I don't know if that's what this brought up with me, because so much duality is dual gods and goddesses are so brought up in so many different teachings and religions. It's just good to realize it and look at it again.
Yeah, it helps so much to have a key that will unveil, to some extent at least, the esoteric meaning. When you go globetrotting and you come across these fabulous teachings, through, in your case, the ruins, to have some understanding beyond what you're going to get in your exoteric guidebook, it can be really useful. I have no doubt that, the gods and goddesses of the Mayan culture were very much in line with, because they were certainly expressive of the ancient wisdom teachings, though I haven't studied it yet. And so can't give you specific examples, but I've seen enough to know that that it is extant in that culture. Thanks, Greg. Anyone else?
Yes, we've got a couple more. Vivian says he writes about the ancient solar system. Is that the one before this one?
Oh, let's see, where? Here? He writes about it here. I'm trying to find what exactly. I mean, the ancient solar system usually does mean the first solar system, but I want to make sure. I'm not sure just where she's referencing it from. So I don't know. It looks to me like this entire teaching has to do with this solar system. And
It's
mostly,
down towards the bottom
okay, after this,
on the right. Third
right.
line up on the right.
Okay.
The 7 planets of the ancient solar system. No, your other right.
My right, yeah. 7 on the
Up 1 above the word Saturn.
Oh, I see. Gotcha. I'm sorry, I couldn't find it. The art spectrum, 7 tones of finally descending through different states of consciousness become the 7 planets of the ancient solar system. I think it's talking about this solar system in its elemental phase, when you had the initial 7 sacred planets and then the solar logos. That's my understanding of this. But out of context, it's hard to know, because you would have to look, at the culture. But most of the ancient wisdoms and the cultural series of analogies and mythology deals with this solar system, right? But that is a peculiar phrase. Yeah. See, because what follows is they build the 7 heavens and the 7 earths. And 7 wasn't the number of the previous solar system. And so I'm thinking that it's the early stages of this solar system. Anyone else?
Lenora says Kabbalah Elohim is assigned to Binah with Saturn attribute.
Yeah, that makes sense. Saturn would be the third ray, that third quality of Binah, which holds the ring past not to the 7 below, so yes. Anyone else?
No, I think we've got everything right now.
Okay, good. I'm grateful for your interest, folks, because it's great stuff. All right, next, HPB describes the particular physical attribute of the circle that makes it unique among symbols, a curve that re-enters upon itself. Then suggests that, quote, no better definition could be given of the evident nature of deity. No other symbol is distinguished by a single attribute, a curved line that continuously enters back on itself, right? Next, which having its circumference everywhere, the boundless, has therefore its central point also everywhere. In other words, is in every point of the universe. This description moves the circle out of the realm of drawable symbols. Because remember, up in the first part of this, it's the mystic that divines the fact that the circle is, according to a definition of a mystic, right? This isn't something that was seen on a piece of paper. But when you take it off the paper out of the realm of drawable symbols into a conceptual abstraction, which is what's described here, and thus closer to the idea that the symbol intends to express. For there's nothing outside the scope of deity, represented by the circumference, whose source can nevertheless be found in every manifest singularity, every person, every atom of substance. The source of deity stands at the center of. So that's the duality of scope and source. This idea is beautifully stated in the Zohar in terms of light and motion. Can we get a reader for this, please?
Joe, can you read that, please?
Yes. In the words of the Zohar, the indivisible point, minimize something here, sorry.
It's all right.
Right. Sorry. Which has no limit and cannot be comprehended because of its purity and brightness, expanded from without, forming a brightness that served the indivisible point as a veil. Yet the latter also could not be viewed in consequence of its immeasurable light. It too expanded from without, and this expansion was its garment. Thus, through a constant upheaving motion, finally the world originated.
Okay, and that's right out of the Zohar. The next sentence. Actually, I should ask you, any thoughts or questions about this? It's quite a beautiful passage, really. You have the the brightness that exudes, that comes off of the point, the refulgent glory, serves as a veil for that indivisible point. I find that quite beautiful. Okay. The next sentence reads.
We have
go ahead.
a hand up. Up, went away. And I didn't see, there it is, Robert.
Go ahead, Robert. You're muted, or you might have a mechanical mute on your headset or something. Still not coming through.
Okay, can you hear me?
There you go.
I find this phrase interesting, expanded from without. Could that not also be expanded from within?
Let me find it.
It's in the third line.
Expanded from without, right? Indivisible point which has no limit and cannot be comprehended because of its purity and brightness. Expanded from without. Yeah, I would think it was expanded from within, the source being within. So I'm not sure just what they mean by using it without here.
It states the same thing.
Yeah.
Further down. It's interesting.
Cannot be viewed in the concept that it is too expanded from without, right? It too expanded from without. And thus, in this expansion was its garment. Well, that gives us some key. This expansion was its garment, which is the quote without, right? It's oddly termed because we would think expanded would suggest the source of the expansion, right? But
I guess if you got rid of the from, it would work.
Got rid of the what? From, yeah.
From.
Yeah, well, I think the meaning is the same. And it's made clear by this phrase, the expansion was its garment, which is that expansion of
Right.
light,
Okay.
the garment that veils the source of purity. But thanks for pointing that out.
And then we have a couple of more comments.
Mhm.
Thomas says this correlates with Nassim Haramein's unified field theory, which postulates that there is a miniature black hole at the center of every photon. This black hole is the void in which the physical world flashes into and out at the speed of light.
Isn't that astonishing? And what's so exciting about that is the correlation to, that you have science and esoteric philosophy coming together, possibly, I mean, we don't have any proof, but it certainly is a profound metaphor for that portal between the manifested realm and the unmanifest. Yeah, thanks for that.
And then Anne Veronica says something similar. She says the Big Bang and its expansion, and it reminds me that it is coming from another dimension, the spirale.
Yeah, and that's the point that the scientists miss. They just say, well, we can't talk about it. Anything before the Big Bang you can't talk about because there is nothing before the Big Bang, because they're physical, measurable, oriented in that direction. So everything starts with the Big Bang in science. But in fact, we know through philosophy that the Big Bang is such that it is. It's not exactly how it came down, but is an effect of the intent of the third logos to express through the sevenfold, through the seven rays. Okay, anyone else? Okay, the next sentence reintroduces three numbers, 7, 9, and 10, which all proceed from the invisible deity. That's the first. So you have the invisible deity, which is followed by the 7, 9, and 10. Okay. Much about these three numbers is indicated in HPB's wording, the primitive 7 and the 9 without, and 10, including their synthetical unit, there meaning the 9 without. You see? So primitive here means prime or first. The 7 in 1. Then 9 without, representing the scope, but not the source of deity. And finally 10, scope and source, point and circle, right? Originally written as a circle with its diameter, which looks like this. This final 10 represents the full outer potential of the invisible deity. That's what relates it back through the oneness, right? Actually, through the zero-ness rather than the oneness. It's the zero aspect of the 10 that relates it back to the invisible deity. Okay. One system that integrates the 7, 9, and 10. Wait a minute. Yeah, I skipped one. So this sentence ends with, from which it steps into man, suggesting that the qualities of the number 10, unity in diversity, manifest through and thus determine the nature of humankind. And 10 is indeed the number of man or humanity. A system that integrates the 7, 9, and 10 is the Kabbalistic tree of life as it relates to Adam Kadmon, the archetypal man, that's where this 10 comes in. It's a whole field of study having to do with the manifestation of 10 through Adam Kadmon, also called anatomy occultus. So could we get a reader for, oh, let's do 2 readers here.
Okay, I'm going to start with Thomas because he had another comment on the previous page.
Okay.
He says, what is the synthetical unit? That was down. Can you go back?
Sure. Synthetical unit.
Yeah, it's right above that. No. There, you got it highlighted now.
Yeah, there it is too. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So the synthetical unit is the source, the cause, the invisible deity, the zero ana akern that Manly P. Hall elaborated on. But this comes through the one from which the 7 proceed, which is the third logos, right? But the ultimate source of synthesis itself is what's called here, let me go back, the invisible deity, right? So the invisible deity and also the Dian Chohans, which are the primitive 7, and then you have the 9 without. So that's the 1 and 9, which is the invisible deity, and the synthetic 7, which all together make the 1. But the real source of the synthesis, as shown here, is not the 1, but rather the 0. You could say that's the life aspect that lies at the center. It would be the point in the circle, right? This would be the scope of the 10ness, its total manifestation in this solar system, the ring pass knot of the solar system. And then you have the source of deity itself at the center of the point, which is the synthesizing unit. Okay, let's see, getting back to this.
Okay, now if Thomas starts, and then if Robert will finish, please.
Gladly, thank you. With the Hebrews, the indirect.
Robert, can you pump your volume up a bit?
This is Thomas.
Oh, Thomas, sorry.
How's that?
That's better.
With the Hebrews, the indirect conception of such was couched in a term of negation and comprehension, viz. Ein Sof, or the without bounds. But the symbol of its first comprehensive manifestation was the conception of a circle with its diameter line to carry at once a geometric, phallic, and astronomic idea, for the one takes its birth from the knot or the circle, without which it could not be. And from one, or primal one, spring the 9 digits, the geometrically all plane shapes, and geometrically all plane shapes. So in the Kabbalah, this circle with its diameter line is the picture of the 10 Sephiroth, or emanations, composing the Adam Kadmon, the archetypal man, primitive, the creative origin of all things. This idea of connecting the circle and its diameter line, that is number 10, with the signification of the reproductive organs in the most holy place, was carried out constructively in the King's Chamber, or Holy of Holies, of the Great Pyramid, in the Tabernacle of Moses, and in the Holy of Holies of the Temple of Solomon. It is the picture of a double womb, or in Hebrew, the letter is that hey, is at the same time the number 5 and symbol of the womb, and twice 5 is 10, or the phallic number.
Okay, go ahead.
Robert, can you?
Yes, this double womb also shows the duality of the idea carried from the highest spiritual down to the lowest or terrestrial plane, and by the Jews limited to the latter. With them, therefore, the number 7 has acquired the most prominent place in their exoteric religion, a cult of external forms and rituals. As their Sabbath, for instance, the seventh day sacred to their deity, the moon, symbolical of the generative Jehovah. But with other nations, the number 7 was typical of theogonic evolution of cycles, cosmic planes, and the 7 forces and occult powers in cosmos as a boundless whole, whose first upper triangle was unreachable to the finite intellect of man, while other nations therefore busied themselves in their forcible limitation of cosmos in space and time. Only with its septenary manifested plane, the Jews centered this member solely in the moon and based all their sacred calculations thereupon.
Thank you, Robert. Any thoughts or questions about this? We see much of what we had been looking at before, right? The idea of the 10, right? And that in the Holy of Holies, the 2 aspects, right? Where is it? The 1 and the 0, which he calls HPB calls, I should say, a phallic symbol. Why phallic? It's just the creation is all. The diameter is the means by which all comes forth, right? So it is inherently phallic. That is, the duality of spirit and matter comes forth, right, through this number. So her exception with the Jewish faith is that they focus on the latter, on the form aspect, the lunar aspect of 7, which is, from one point of view, when separated out like this, is the form aspect, therefore feminine, therefore lunar. Okay. Any thoughts or questions about this?
Yes, we have a hand up. Go ahead, Yvonne.
Mute myself. Okay, I have a question about the Jews and centered about the moon. Is it because I think I remember the Jews were moon chain humanity? Is that why they're centered on the moon? Because that's where they individualized, or?
Well, it's I know they're characterized by the 3rd ray. What you're saying is also my memory. However, I can't absolutely say that to be true as fact. If somebody else knows, from DK teaching, whether that's the case, or from, from HPB, but that is also my memory. They are an incredibly ancient people. That's, suggesting moon chain origins. And part of their, quote, problem of the Jews had to do with their 3rd ray orientation, and thus their desire to move into the form aspect, right?
Yeah, and I think I remember they were the chosen ones because they were more developmentally.
Yes, that's another quality of the 3rd ray and the 3rd aspect. There's a bit of the first shall be last quality going on here. They preceded, but they represented the form aspect, which is also comes from the previous solar system, which is form building solar system. I don't have all my facts down about this, but I think that's correct.
All right, thank you.
Yeah,
And you have a couple of hands up, so maybe one of them.
maybe.
Gregory says the moon chain folks came in pre-conscious times at the transition between the earliest form of, was there more to it than that? Oh, the earliest form of the Atlantean root race.
Okay, well, this is a rabbit hole, guys, that I don't think we should go down. There's 2 sources of humanity that's shown there. Atlantis, there were those who invented it. It was the last group of humans that individualized in Atlantis, and there was the earliest described group of humans to individualize were in the moon chain. So and just how the Jewish aspect comes into play with that, I can't really say beyond what we've already described.
Okay, and then Robert has his hand up. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Robert.
Robert.
Yeah, I really understand this is a rabbit hole. It's in the DK teachings, that idea that Judaism came from the first solar system, I've always found really interesting and confusing. I can understand maybe the conceptual nature of Judaism came, but the idea that the Jews came from the first soul, I mean, I'm incarnated into a Jewish body this time around. Does that mean I am from the first solar system? You know,
Not at all. The first solar system was form building. The whole purpose of that time was perfection and to make automatic the form aspect. And so that in this system, that could become the basis for the goal of the second solar system, which is gaining awareness of the soul aspect, right? And so the third ray and the form aspect and the Jewish culture or civilization, because hey, anybody can be incarnated into, you know, a Jewish cultural body, or a body that then is in a family where, you know, the Jewish culture is taught. You know, anybody can, in anybody's next incarnation or previous incarnation. It's not, you know, something that you have been connected with since the previous solar system, and only that at all, you know. So at least that's my understanding.
well, I like that idea that it would be an opportunity to have certain experiences or to be exposed to certain ideas or modes of behavior.
Yes.
Enough, in my own case, I was born into a totally a-religious Jewish family where everybody was atheistic. So it's kind of fascinating, the duality of all of it. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. You know, DK at one point says that the best antidote for somebody who's gone too far in the direction of mysticism is a lifetime as an agnostic, right? So the reorientation towards the factual, the intellectual, is actually along the growth line, you know, so it's always a question of balancing what has come before, you know.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Gregory. You got your hand up.
It's hard to really say. I think I understood that, Francis, that you were saying that I was trying to explain it in the best way. I get that. My understanding is that the moon chain was kind of pre-conscious to the Atlantean root race. So they were there before because we then individualized. Those of us who may have been on the moon chain would have individualized on that moon chain in our conscious expression. And whether that happened in the middle or the part time of when the first root race, when the first Lemurians begin to have some conscious perspective. I mean, maybe I'm just blabbing, but I think I understand what you were saying there, Francis.
Yeah. So the chronological order is, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on that. You're in.
Oh, no problem. It's fine.
The chronology is that the life aspect moved from the moon, which was the previous chain of Earth, to this globe, right? And that then a new series of 7 races began. the first in this earth chain to manifest, to individualize, was in Lemurian times at the fourth, fifth root race, subroot race of that third race. Then individualization occurred. The first two races, as is always the case, are just form-oriented, involutional, and the goal is the achievement of the form for that race, right? So then following, the Lemurian individualized humanity, which was a great bulk of who is now inhabiting the planet, then following that were those who individualized in Atlantis. So you have these three groups. You have the moon chain, which are really the oldest of those of us who have individualized. And I think DK says at some point, that many of those who have achieved the higher initiations came from that because they have been at this whole process longer, but that one of the things that distinguishes the Christ is that he is of this earth chain and has come up all the way through, took his third initiation in Atlantis and has gone all the way up through the seventh initiation in this earth chain. So I do not have a full and absolute knowledge of this, but that's my understanding of the chronology.
Okay, we have lots more comments and lots more hands. So let's go, Scott, go ahead, please.
Here we go. Yes. I was going to go back to this, the double womb here and the
That's great.
And we have to remember that, or we have to consider we have two diameters here, and I think they're switching between them. You have one that's the vertical one, which is phallic.
Right.
And it's horizontal, which is the double womb. It's feminine.
That's a good point. Yes, indeed. Right, and that gives you the also the difference between 5 and 10.
I think so. It seems to me that because that's always, and you end up within the cross within the circle, but maybe that's upcoming yet. So I don't know if that's true with what's going on here, but we do have two diameters and they may be switching between them.
Yep, and the 10 is very specifically this vertical diameter.
Yeah, it seems like it.
Because it's the 9 plus 1, and the 9 being the outer manifestation of specifically of the 31415 of the diameter.
But remembering at the first symbols that she gives at the very beginning of the SD, the first diameter that shows up, I'm pretty sure, is the horizontal one.
That's true. That's because it's the symbol of the second logos, which is, you could say, Mula Prakriti, or the substantive realm in its homogeneous state, right? And that's the polarity of the first logos, which come together in the third logos. So that's different than the later phallic demonstration that's shown in the 10, at least as I see it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think the 10 comes actually through the third. You could say that one way of looking at it, to put it all in chronological perspective, would be that the first existent diameter would be the horizontal one, and then the vertical diameter, which can be viewed separately as the number 10, came into being when it crosses the horizontal diameter, right? And therefore bringing spirit and matter into the form aspect, or combining them in such a way, through Fohat, combining them through the third logos into manifestation.
Interesting. Descent into form.
Yeah.
Descending from the top down or extending from the center in both directions.
Well, that, you always have both. An argument can be made for either from the inner to the outer. They're just metaphors after all. But when you're looking at, the way symbols are built, and if you have the point in the center of the circle, it suggests more the inner to the outer, right? And then the bridging through the diameter of the potential scope or outer, right? But God knows I don't have all the answers to the fine points of these symbols, and it's really is an interesting question, like this double womb, what is that? And, is it the potential and spirit, and very much like the difference between, say, Aries and Cancer, like one womb and the next, or what, where do you put those two?
Right.
I mean, it says here in the SD, the double womb also shows the duality of the idea carried from the highest spiritual down to the lowest terrestrial. So, yeah, I think one of those wombs is definitely physical manifestation, but just where do you place that higher womb?
And does it not then associate the womb with 5 and phallic with 10, male, female, somehow?
Yeah, well, that's a question in of itself. Both are numbers for humankind.
Mm-hmm.
I have to put it in a disclaimer at this point, which is that I do thorough research on this part of the text, but when I use further text to explain this text, I don't then do exhaustive research on that further explanations. Otherwise, Martha would have to bring me dinner, at my desk, because it's endless. You can just keep going in and in. So often when we're talking about these descriptions of her fundamental commentaries, I haven't researched it as deeply. So, and that's the case here. I did not, for instance, go into finding out more about the double womb. I knew it'd come back to bite me, but there you have it.
It's the way it is.
Yeah, it's just the way it is,
It's rabbit holes all along. Of course,
That's right.
You have to move on.
Yeah, where do you, it's like, if you think this is really an extensive exploration of the secret doctrine, well, the deeper you explore it, the more you realize how superficial, this exploration is. But hey, it's better than just, reading through it and thinking you've got it, Anyway.
Okay, now I'll get to you in a minute, Martha and Lenora, but I want to get to Thomas's comments right now because I think they're relevant to what Scott and Francis were just talking about. It says the one is seen as the creative aspect and the zero, the whole creation. And the joining of these two is the synthesis, right? He says he's just getting his ducks in a row.
Not quite, at least not as it's described here. I can see how you could see that. See, the circumference of the circle is as you described it, which is the scope of creation. And from that perspective, the diameter is the source of that final scope. But in fact, the circle without the diameter, which is, in Mazdean culture, the zero ana a cairn, is the symbol for the causeless cause, which is completely unmanifest, right? So it can, the circle, the meaning of the circle itself is modified by that which occurs within the circle, you see. So when you have, for instance, a cross in this circle, then the circle represents the scope, but it's also representative of the source. But in this case, for instance, that invisible point at the center is the source, becomes the source, which when the circle is left with nothing inside it, is the point represents this, right? Which is the source of the point, always the life aspect, which lies interior to any manifestation, right? What's in theosophy called the absolute. Okay, that may not have been satisfactory, but that's how I understand it.
Okay, and then Anne Veronica says creation is a double womb. Otherwise, the existence of matter and spirit have no meaning.
Oh, that's interesting. I would, can you come on your mic and talk a little more about that?
Okay, let me unmute her. Okay, you should be able to talk now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
It's always boggling me. Why is there matter and spirit? Because we always think about matter as something that is the lowest form of spirit. But if you think of it as a double womb, they both existed. One is matter, the other is spirit, and then they come together again. I can't explain it more than that.
No, that's very good. And it kind of set me on a line that was a bit revelatory. So thank you for that, Anne Veronica. If you look at the idea that, you know, both spirit and matter have a womb, then you can look at it in a couple of ways, which is from the unmanifest, the potential of manifestation, again, we're never going to get off of this page, that the potential of manifestation comes through the diameter, right? And that's one womb. In other words, matter issues from spirit. But interestingly, if you put then a womb associated with matter, you can do two things with it, which is that you move from the potential of matter, you know, which is mula prakriti or substance on the non-material levels, into substance. So it's then a further manifestation. That's one way. But another way would be to see it as an evolutionary process, is from the womb of matter is born or reborn the spirit aspect through soul infusion. So it can be seen as a return, which I prefer. I think it's more philosophic than the other, even though both, you know, and what's actually meant, well, we need an expert. So that's how I see it. But thanks for that, Anna Veronica. That helps actually me understand this idea of the double womb. Okay, anyone else before we move on?
Oh, yes, lots more. All right.
This
Now,
world-
Lenora, thank you, Lenora, for having patience with me as I skipped over a couple of others. She says the first three sephira are considered separate to the remaining seven sephira. The first triangle above death. And then she says the 9 sephira, Yesod, the 9th sephira, Yesod, is assigned to the moon, the womb before materialized Malkuth assigned to the earth.
Right. Yeah, that's a good
I hope I
point.
didn't butcher anything. I'm sorry.
No, you did it good. So 9 is down here, the moon aspect is the 9th sephira, and that's very good in the sense that it's the fullness of manifestation or the form aspect, which is other than the synthesized totality of 10, right? So this is a very confusing chart. I just used it to basically show how complex the subject of the anatomiae occulti, or, you know, the, let's see back here, the archetypal man, the Adam Kadmon, is in the study of this, right? But it's basically the Sephiroth. And so what she was saying is that these three, these upper three, Kether, Chokmah, Bina, which is basically the well, depending on how you look at it, but you can see this as the third logos. If you look at the 10 as the totality of the manifestation with its unified principle, so in that sense, it's the unified quality, the upper point of the triangle, as opposed to that which lies beyond. See this ring back here? It says I and Soph on it. That suggests that this is third logoic. That is this first singularity, right? And then the second is the masculine principle. That would be the 9. And the third is the feminine principle, which would be the 7 of the you know, the 10, 9, and 7 that she describes. And then that 7 manifests as 7 Sephiroth. And then in addition to that, you have what, who was it that just pointed this out? I'm sorry, I lost
Lenora.
Lenora, thanks. What Lenora pointed out was that 9 is also the lunar symbol, which is, it reinforces the idea that it's a fundamentally matter, or outer, as HPB describes it, right? So you have a kind of duality in Kether and this symbol, which I don't know the name of, which is the 9th Sephiroth. Kether, the first Sephiroth, and the 9th.
Let me unmute Lenora. Can you talk?
Yeah, I can talk, but let me lower the baby's, wait a minute. Okay. What is it now?
So yeah, I'm not really sure what you have in mind, BL, to bring her back on. So you have Kether.
What I was trying to say, if you read 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th sentence up from the bottom, it says, whose first upper triangle was unreachable to the finite intellect of man. That's because it consists of Kether, Chokmah, and Bina, which is the supernal triad. So anything below that, we were able to comprehend. So when you get down to the 9th Sephira, it's actually considered like the womb. It's the matrix of all the vibratory, because everything you're talking about is like in the astral realm. We're not talking about physical things until we get to Makuth. Makuth's physical.
That's right. Yes, good point.
Yeah, so when you say spirit is matter, it is. Matter is spirit because it's just slowed down vibratorily so we can experience it through this, our vessel, our bodies, our apparatus.
Which is the Makuth, indeed.
Which is the Makuth, yeah. It has a lot to do with consciousness also, you know, because that's the only, well, I wouldn't say the only thing, but in the astral levels, anything above the physical, our thoughts are considered not really things, but that's what functions on those levels. So it's consciousness. Yeah, so I could go on and on and on, but thank you for.
And I appreciate it. And, you know, HPB is going to dive into this subject more deeply. This is sort of in passing to describe, you know, these numbers 7, 9, and 10 that we were discussing. But you know, I used it as an example. I use it as a, you know, as a way of illustrating those numbers 7, 9, and 10. But actually, you've helped me a lot understand, especially around this 9 being the womb, which is the source, it'd be the lower womb of the two wombs.
Yeah,
It's
the 9
so-
months
Yeah,
of a, and
exactly.
all that kind of thing. Anyways, I don't know if you can see him. This is my grandson. So say
No.
hello.
Welcome,
No,
Oh,
whoever
you
we
can't see
we
him?
have your
Oh, that's
we have your
okay.
video off, so we have your
Oh,
video
okay.
disabled.
Oh,
So sorry.
He's
next
welcome.
time.
Thank
Alrighty.
you. Okay, thank you. Okay, it's again, I'm pulling back from the edge of the abyss, folks, because this is truly, I mean, if you want to know how complex this study is, here, just take a look at this, right? It's this a whole realm of teaching on the Atman cabin, also called Anatomiae Occulti. And you can see it, the illustration on the left and the detail on the right of that illustration, which depicts the upper 9 Sephiroth on the right, along with their planetary, chakra, archangel, and many other associations. So this is an enormous study, basically it's assimilation or synthesizing a whole number of disciplines, right? From the astrological to the alchemical, and you see all these references here. So clearly this is not the time, to do this deep dive. But I did want you to see how the 10 is, let's see, get back to our original statement, for which it steps into man. That's what brought us along this journey. Okay.
All right,
So-
you have a couple of more comments. Vivian says, I'm wondering if this is why it was so important that Jesus was said to be born of a virgin, i.e. of spirit. And then Greg adds to that, perhaps Jesus was actually born of a virgin.
Yeah, first of all, number one is philosophically, I think, right on the money, which is that it's, there's a lot of ways interpreting that. One being that it's the purificatory aspects of matter for the spirit aspect of that initiate to be born out of is in itself metaphorical language for that purificatory quality could be called being born from a virgin, right? And there again, this is another rabbit hole, that involves this idea of immaculate birth. Well, what part of the birth is immaculate, And it's in my understanding, the most important aspect of it is that the consciousness aspect is immaculate. And then you also have the idea that masters can take on myopic bodies and be born without the usual process, right? And therefore, the other is possible. We'll never know the true historical fact around Jesus other than that. Yeah, next, let's move on.
Okay, Karsten says, try to change Kether to Neptune and Chalkman to Uranus. And I'm sorry, is it Dath can be placed with Pluto. 9, the moon in esoteric astrology can hide Neptune or Uranus.
Yes, why don't you come over? I don't have that much in the fridge, but we'll work up something, and I would love to have this conversation into the wee hours of the night. I think what you're saying is entirely possible. If you take these 3 as the synthesizing planets, in theosophy, you could really make a case. DK also talks about the 10 true planets, 7 sacred, but that there's actually 10, and they're going to be associated in this solar system with Adam Kadmon, right? So, and the idea of Pluto as Dath, I like that. That's interesting. Yeah, but can't say any more just now. Or we shouldn't.
Okay,
Thank
and
you.
then Robert has his hand up. Go ahead, Robert.
Hi. I think the fact that we've stumbled into all these rabbit holes is kind of interesting in the sense that in that section that I read about the double womb, where HPB refers to the Jewish religion, the exoteric religion, a cult of external forms and empty rituals. And then at the end, she talks about the Jewish deity being the moon. It seems that part of HPB's mission in writing the Secret Doctrine was to correct materialistic science and fundamentalist religion, whether that was Jewish or Christianity or in any other form. And so at one point, I can't remember where, DK refers to the Kabbalah as a secondary line of teaching. So maybe the Western mind likes digging rabbit holes. Maybe part of the simplification of this is to stay closer to the Eastern teaching. Just a speculation.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to understand, HPB was not anti-Semitic. That's not.
No, not at all. Not at all.
It has to do with the focus and the orientation. She says, and it's coming up too, which is that, where is it? Other nations busied themselves with forcible limitation of cosmos and time-space only with its septenary manifested planes. The Jews centered their numbers solely on the moon. So she's saying that in other expositions of the ancient wisdom religion use 7 as in recognition of its of the upper triad, that you have the 7 and you have the 3, right? Whereas that the Jewish religion centered around the strictly limited lunar understanding. Okay, I'm going to leave it, guys. I have to pull the plug on this part of it.
I think that's everything. There was one more hand, but it went down. So
okay. So 7, when viewed as the sum total, becomes a lunar number, right? When that's the whole thing being considered, the sum total, then it's a lunar number. It's even considered feminine when seen in that way. But when understood as a manifestation of the unmanifest triad, Kether Shokma Bina, 7 becomes, when combined with them, the source and scope of deity, right? We can also express this duality as 1 and 9. The 1 is universal ideation, expressing itself through the 9 of manifestation. This is the 1 and 9 of the, quote, voice of the Lord's Svabhavat, the voice being the Vahan of manifestation, right? The voice of Lord Svabhavat, the numbers, for he is 1 and 9. So the numbers are all the creative forces that go out through the voice, right? And that's all of it, including Chokma and Bina. Okay? All right. In addition to the sum total of manifestation, 9 is the number of male or phallic potency, the period of human gestation, as was brought up, and is also associated with Teth. That's that symbol there. Fohat, the serpent, and interestingly, with initiation. It is thus a number that infuses scope with source, right? It's the way that scope is achieved by connecting through Fohat, the inner source with the outer. So could we get a reader for this, please?
Yes, Carrie, can you read that for us, please?
The ancients represented it by a serpent, for Fohat hisses as he glides hither and thither in zigzags. The Kabbalah figures it with the Hebrew letter Teth, whose symbol is the serpent, which played such a prominent part in the mysteries. Its universal value is 9, for it is the 9th letter of the alphabet and the 9th door of the 50 portals or gateways that lead to the concealed mysteries of being. It is the magical agent par excellence and designates in Hermetic philosophy life infused into primordial matter.
Okay, thanks, Carrie. So you see, whereas we've been talking about the Sephirah, I should say, which are these locales, the Phohatic influence, this Teth aspect, is represented by these connecting lines or avenues, which are also very specifically ruled by energies and planets, right? So you have the seven brothers Phohat, and they would be represented along these avenues, right? I haven't counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, I mean, 7 is to here, and then it's dropped. So yeah, the seven brothers would follow in that. So any thoughts or questions about this? In addition to the sum total of manifestation, 9 is the number of I read that. The period of human. Yeah, I read that. Sorry. Next, the quote: triangle, first line, cube, second line, and pinnacle is a barely veiled geometrical description of the 31415. Do you see that? I mean, look at the symbols and you'll see that what you have is 31415, right? Triangle, line, square, line, pentagram. And this is, of course, pi, which references the diameter discussed in the first half of this paragraph, but also serves as a graphic symbol of the triadal Atma Buddhi Manas, the third, fourth, and fifth subplanes of the cosmic physical plane, separated by a line. So in a sense, this is also representative of the diameter when it comes to the 10 of humanity, right? Because this is our true nature is described in this place from the form, the ultimate form aspect. We took a look at the numerological relationship between pi and Alkim. I think it was in the last webinar in reference to the Masonic ritual of 3, 5, and 7 steps, right? Here, HPB expands the number of those great beings who are an expression of pi to include, quote, Dhyani Buddhas, Gebers, the Geburim, the Kabiri, and the Elohim, all signifying great men, titans, heavenly men, and on earth the giants. These are synonymous terms representing the same sevenfold deity in different cultures, with the notable exception of the giants, who often but not always opposed the gods. That's the Ahriman principle of duality, where you have the Ormuzd Ahriman. Remember that? Where you had Ahura Mazda, who's like Kethar, and then you have the Geminian Ahriman Ormuzd principle. Well, the giants could be in that Ahriman place. But interestingly, that's, if you look at that, in the Christian metaphorical system, that's the place of Lucifer, right? Who is the light bearer, the Bina, who takes it down to creation, right? Not the evil brother. That's an exoteric understanding. Okay, thoughts or questions on anything?
Yes, Anne Veronica has her hand up. Go ahead, Anne Veronica.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I didn't mean to raise my hand. I must have pressed it by mistake. I'm sorry.
No problem. I saw Lynn was popped up there for a minute too.
Okay, go ahead, Lynn.
This is going back into that paragraph, but What is the Trans-Himalayan Chakra?
Well, if we're the Trans-Himalayan is a word used to mean the source of the ancient wisdom teachings, right? It's you know, these great masters, DK, KH, Moria, etc., all lived in the Himalayas. And so you could say that the entire DK teaching is Trans-Himalayan. So it's a way of saying the true, right? Chakra, which is the circle. Basically, it's a zero and a kern, right? Has inscribed within it. Okay, so it's the circle. Whenever you have one of these symbols and it's raised to its numinal level, then you have the circle inscribed around it. That's how I understand it. Anyone else?
I don't think so at this time.
Okay. All right, next up. Can we get a reader, please? And you start with the 7.
Lynn, can you read that for us, please?
7 was a sacred number with every nation, but none applied it to more physiologically materialistic uses than the Hebrews. With these, it was preeminently the generative number and the 9 the male causative one, forming, as shown by the Kabbalist, the Ots, the tree of the Garden of Eden, the double hermaphrodite rod of the 4th race. Whereas with the Hindus and Aryans generally, the significance was manifold and related almost entirely to purely metaphysical and astronomical truths. This, the tree of the Garden of Eden, was the symbol of the Holy of Holies, the 3 and 4 of sexual separation. Nearly every one of the 22 Hebrew letters are merely phallic symbols. Of the 2 letters as shown above, one, the ayin, is a negative female letter, symbolically an eye, and the other a male letter, sa, a fishhook or a dart.
Okay, so the 70 would be the ayin, and the tza would be the 90, the first one shown there, the fishhook, right? Okay, so, you know, I remember the first time I ran across, you know, HPB's description as phallic. You know, you have to understand that you could just replace with the word that which leads to manifestation, you know, or oriented towards the manifest, right? Okay. So any thoughts or questions about this paragraph? It's much of this we covered in the previous discussion about the Jewish religion and the exoteric orientation. Okay, let's take a closer look at the quote, tree of the Garden of Eden, here called the Ots, a word whose letters in Hebrew are made up of the generative 7 and the male causative potency of 9. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Scott, can you read that for us, please?
The allegory of Adam being driven away from the tree of life means, esoterically, that the newly separated race abused and dragged the mystery of life down into the region of animalism and bestiality. For, as the Zohar shows, the matronetheth, the wife of Metronon symbolically, is the way of the great tree of life, the mighty tree.
The way to, I have to correct you, the way to the great tree of life.
Is the way to the great tree of life, the mighty tree, and Shekinah is divine grace. As explained, this tree reaches the heavenly veil and is hidden between 3 mountains, the upper triad or principles in man. From these 3 mountains, The tree ascends above. The adept's knowledge aspires heavenward, and then redescends below into the adept's ego on earth. This tree is revealed in the daytime and is hidden during the night. That is, revealed to an enlightened mind and hidden to ignorance, which is night. The tree of the knowledge of the good and the evil grows from the roots of the tree of life. But then also, in the Kabbalah, it is plainly to be found that the tree of life was the unsated cross in its sexual aspect, and that the tree of knowledge was the separation and the coming together again to fulfill the fatal condition. To display this in numbers, the values of the letters composing the word Otz tree are 7 and 9, the 7 being the holy feminine number, and 9 the number of the phallic or male energy. This ansated cross is the symbol of the Egyptian female male, Isis Osiris, the germinal principle in all forms, based on the primal manifestation applicable in all directions and in all senses. This is the Kabbalistic view of the Western occultists, and it differs from the more philosophical Eastern or Aryan views upon this subject.
Thank you, Scott. So, thoughts or questions on this? Notice that the tree is reversed. The roots are in heaven, suggesting the direction of source and the direction of the outer display or manifestation. In those palm fronds down at the bottom. So in the Kabbalistic view, the feminine generative 7 and the male phallic 9 together form the tree of life, represented in ancient Egypt by the Ankh, or ansated cross. And that a return to the state of consciousness represented by the tree of life comes through Shekinah, or divine grace, not unlike receiving the blessing of life from the Ankh, depicted in ancient Egyptian bas-reliefs. HPB associates the double hermaphrodite rod with the tree of life because Hermetic mysticism usually describes the serpents as male and female. For the real secret of Hermetic power was its androgyny. This is because Hermes' efficacy depends on his union with the female soul of the world. We studied this in the Eleusinian mysteries, wherein the purpose of the greater mysteries is the second death of Persephone, which reunites her with the solar aspect represented by Hermes. The earthly separative condition is alluded to in the first footnote, which references, quote, the tree of the Garden of Eden. The male and female 9 and 7 are here represented by the more fundamental 3 and 4 of sexual separation. Could we get a reader for this track on 3 and 4?
Okay, I'll read it. The 3 and the 4, the triangle and the cube, are the male and female universal glyph, showing the first aspect of the evolving deity, is stamped forever in the southern cross in the heavens, as in the Egyptian crux ansata, as well expressed. The cube unfolded is in display a cross of the Tao, or Egyptian form, or of the Christian cross form. A circle attached to the first gives the ansated cross. Numbers 3 and 4 counted on the cross, showing a form of the Hebrew golden candlestick in the Holy of Holies. And of the 3 plus 4 equals 7, and 6 plus 1 equals 7. Days in the circle of the week, as 7 lights of the sun. So also as the week of 7 lights gave origin to the month and year, so it is the time marker of birth. The cross form being shown then by the connected use of the form 113 ratio 355, the symbol is completed by the attachment of a man to the cross. You want me to read that footnote?
Yeah.
Once more, remember the Hindu Vitoba crucified in space, the significance of the sacred sign, the swastika, Plato's decussated man in space, etc. This kind of measure was made to coordinate with the idea of the origin of human life, and hence the phallic form.
Okay. Any thoughts or questions? So, quote, the cross form being shown then by the connected use of the form 113 to 355 references pi, because that's what these two numbers together create, right? In fact, very closely, like within a millionth of a part. And we looked at this in our earlier reading. 113 is a number often used to reference man, which is why the, quote, symbol is completed by the attachment of man to the cross. A passage from the second volume of Secret Doctrine sheds further light on this idea, as well as info on the Hindu god Vitoba that was referenced in the footnote, illustrated here. Notice the nail mark in the left foot of this god. Could we get a reader, please?
Yes, Joe, can you read that, please?
The author proves these points by further elucidation and reveals the secret meaning of more than one dead letter narrative by showing that probably man was the primordial word, the very first word possessed by the Hebrews, whoever they were, to carry the idea by sound of a man. The essential of this word was 113, the numerical value of that word from the beginning, and carried with it the elements of the cosmical system displayed. This is demonstrated by the Hindu Vitoba, a form of Vishnu, as said already. The figure of Vitoba, even to the nail marks on the feet, is that of Jesus crucified in all its details save the cross. And that man was meant to is proved to us further by the fact, and that man was meant is, that's a hard sentence, and that man was meant is proved to us further by the fact of the initiate being reborn after his crucifixion on the tree of life. This tree has now become exoterically, through its use by the Romans as an instrument of torture and the ignorance of the early Christian schemers, the tree of death. The asterisk, see Moore's Hindu pantheon, where Vitoba's left foot bears the mark of the nail on the figure of his idol.
So no need to go look in your Hindu pantheon. Here it is. This is the illustration from the book. So we see that it would be easy to miss without this description. Any thoughts or questions about this? Here's another example of man on the cross, this time with the Aztec god Yecatecutli. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, you know what? I want to do this because I don't want to start with this next time. We're just going to, most of this is just to read through it. It's got a couple of good points in it, but could we get, let's see, what's her name? Who's that fast reader that we have here? Who am I thinking of?
Yeah, I don't think she's with us right now, Lorraine.
Yeah, Lorraine. She would be perfect for this, but somebody who's quick.
Who reads really fast.
I'll give it a go.
Yeah,
Thanks.
there you go. Go for it.
With the Hindus and Aryans generally, the significant was manifold and related almost entirely to purely metaphysical and astronomical truths. We are told by a Kabbalist who in a work not yet published contrasts the Kabbalah and Zohar with Aryan esotericism. Thank you. That the Hebrew clear, short, terse, and exact modes far and beyond measure surpass the toddling word talk of the Hindus, just as the parallelisms The psalmist says, my mouth speaks with my tongue. I know not thy numbers. The Hindu glyph shows by its insufficiency in the large mixture of advantageous sides the same borrowed plumage that the Lion Greeks had, and that masonry has, which in the rough monosyllabic and apparent poverty of the Hebrew shows the latter to have come down from a far more remote antiquity than any of these, and to have been the source or religious systems by their Shastras and Puranas. Or nearer the old original source than any of them. This is entirely erroneous. Our learned brother and correspondent judges apparently the Hindu religious systems by their Shastras and Puranas, probably the latter, and in their modern translation, moreover, which is disfigured out of all recognition by the Orientalists. It is to their philosophical systems that one has to turn to their esoteric teaching. If he would make a point of comparison, no doubt the symbology of the Pentateuch and even of the New Testament comes from the same source, but surely the pyramid of Cheops, whose measurements are all found repeated by Professors Piazzi Smith in Solomon's alleged and mythical temple, is not of a later date than the Mosaic books. Hence, if there is any such great identity is claimed, it must be due to servile copying on the part of the Jews, not on that of the Egyptians. The Jewish glyphs and even their language, the Hebrew, are not original. They are borrowed from the Egyptians, from whom Moses got his wisdom, from the Coptic, the probable kinsman, if not parent, of the old Phoenician, and from Hyksos, their alleged ancestors, as Josephus shows in his Against Apion 1.25. But who are the Hyksos shepherds? Who are the Egyptians? History knows nothing of the question and speculates and theorizes out of the depths of the respective consciousness of historians. Kamism, or Old Coptic, says Bunsen, is from Western Asia and contains some germ of the Semitic, thus bearing witness to the primitive cognate unity of the Aryan Semitic races. And he places the great events in Egypt 9,000 years BC. The fact is that in the archaic esotericism, and I can't see the last few lines.
Oh, and Aryan thought we find a grand philosophy, whereas in the Hebrew records, we find only the most surprising ingenuity in inventing apotheoses for phallic worship and sexual theogony. So apotheoses is the raising of a being to Godhead, right? Okay, so if you have any thoughts or questions, go ahead. The upshot of this footnote is that the esoteric Hindu and Egyptian philosophies predate, form the basis for, and far exceed the largely phallic emphasis of the Jewish beliefs. One of HPB's pet peeves, which he expresses in the Isis Unveiled pages here cited, was the low regard that the Orientalists, and that was this group of Europeans who studied the Vedas and came up with these really exoteric theories that didn't get to the causal heart of the teachings at all. Anyway, low regard that the Orientalists of her time held for the legends, myths, allegories, and symbols of the Egyptians and Hindus, while at the same time viewing distorted Old Testament versions of the same legends, myths, allegories, and symbols with unexamined reverence. We still have this maddening prejudice directed toward the Hindu faith, with modern born-again Christian missionaries traveling to India in order to save the souls of Hindus. This is ignorance, same ignorance, in a newer and, to my mind, even more unpalatable garb. So we're right at the cusp to finishing this stanza, but at least her reference to it. But this whole first part is a quote from somebody, which she then says, this is entirely erroneous, right? This part here. So yeah. Okay, if there's no questions, then let's set forth the times for the next sessions. We're going into a little different period here with a conference coming up. But that won't affect the next two. So
Right. We'll have the next Secret Doctrine is going to be at 7 p.m. GMT on the 18th of April. And the next Secret Teaching of All Ages, this is a change. We normally have that on the first Sunday of each month, and the first Sunday of April is Easter. So it's going to be on the 11th of Easter, the 11th of April. Okay, so 7 p.m. the 11th of April will be the next webinar, and that will be Secret Teaching of All Ages. And then the following week will be the next Secret Doctrine. So we hope to see you all there.
and then there will be a, I believe we're not going to be able to do the Secret Teachings webinar in May. Is that right? I think
No, we're doing that one on the 9th of May.
Secret Teachings of All
Uh,
Ages.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and then we're doing, and so there is no
Yeah, and
interruption.
the reason for that change to the second Sunday was because of the conference, but the conference just ends by then. So yeah, the Secret Doctrine, it continues to be the third Sunday through at least June, which is all I have written down here.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. So
So
Secret Doctrine stays the same. Secret Teaching goes to the second Sunday for the next
2 times in a row. Yeah.
So, okay, but you get your invitations and just pay attention to the time change, and you'll be good. So, thank you all for being here. It was an interesting discussion today. I always feel it a privilege to host this series. So, thank you for showing up, and I'll see you on the second Sunday for the Secret Teachings. So until then, bye-bye.